read the newspaper and have known me for a number of years, and a lot of you have, I write and am a great believer in planning by the phases of the moon and signs of the zodiac. Let me say first of all that this system of utilizing the phases of the moon and the signs of the zodiac is so simple, because all it is it just suggests to you what day to plan on, if you can possibly do that. What sign, what phase of the moon. And now, and in fact we had a story just this week, you might have seen it in the paper, about the lingering downturn that keeps gardens, the moon going, that this is really picking up because of the downturn in the economy. One. Two, because people are wanting to eat better. There's more of a nutritional concern about vegetables and produce and livestock, of course, too, that is organically grown, that does not have all the preservatives and everything in it. Well, the only way you can really control what you're eating as far as a vegetable garden is, and since that's what I'm primarily talking about, is to know what you put on that garden, whether it's the fertilizer or if it's an insecticide or herbicide or whatever. It's the only way that you can really control that. Now, a lot of the folks at the farmer's market, I know probably a lot of you visit there, and maybe even some of you have had occasion to sell things there. A lot of them grow organically, and they can pretty much tell you and will what they use on their vegetables to control the insects. So all this is to say that I think that anyone who, at least it just makes sense to me, anyone who is trying to have the best, most productive garden that you can is going to want to use whatever tools are available to them. And planning by the phases of the moon and the signs of the zodiac does not require you to go out and buy a new piece of equipment. You don't have to buy a new tiller, you don't have to buy a tractor, you don't even have to buy a hoe. All you have to do is just plant on the days that are most productive. Now, there are always those folks who say, well, this sounds like voodoo to me, or this sounds like some kind of astrology, and my preacher told me that I'd be burning forever if I listened to that kind of thing, and all of that. But in the 3rd chapter of the book of Ecclesiastes, first 8 verses of that chapter says everything there is a season, time for every purpose under heaven, time to be born, time to die, time to plant, time to pluck up what is planted. So for those who feel that they need to have a biblical anchor to this, I think that very much is so, because this is just using the natural things that are in our environment for the benefit of your garden. We're all aware of what the tides do to the oceans, and or rather gravity does, the gravitational pull that causes the high tide and the low tide. It's the same situation with this. The gravitational pull of the moon, if it can affect anything as big as an ocean, I have to believe it can affect something that's probably the size of an onion. So this is what we're talking about with regard to this. Now, I want at any time that you all have any questions to ask, because I don't talk for too long. And you never know, as Josh will tell you, when I'm going to fall into a coughing fit, and he'll have to turn off the camera, and we'll just have to wait a minute until I get through with it. Some kind of Kentucky allergy. I've only lived in Kentucky my whole life. 2 phases to this, and you have this on your paper. And Josh was pointing out to me, he said, you type that on a typewriter. Well, of course, this predates him by so many years. I don't know what a typewriter is. We have a couple sitting in the back room with the paper, and I said, you know those things with the keys on them that are big and everything. But we do have them. I don't think they even work anymore. But yes, I did, because that's how long I've been doing this. And even before I went to work for the paper, I was following this. Phases of the moon is the first thing that we want to talk about here. There are 2 phases of the moon, 2 main phases. The light phase of the moon and the dark phase of the moon. Now, the light phase of the moon is from the time when there's no moon visible in the sky, the night sky, until the full moon. This is 2 weeks of what they call the growing of the moon, the waxing of the moon. The moon is getting bigger all the time. That is going to start. Right now we are in the dark phase of the moon today. We're in the dark phase of the moon right now until July the 1st, next Friday. We have another whole week of the dark phase of the moon. And that phase change will occur at like 4 o'clock in the morning, 4:30 in the morning, something like that. It will change from the light phase or the dark phase to the light phase. During this 2-week period, whether it's the light phase or the dark phase, in the dark phase you're going to want to plant anything that produces beneath the ground. And when we say beneath the ground, of course, we mean...
Now wait a minute, did you say the light phase?
Dark phase.
Okay,
the dark phase. The dark phase to produce beneath the ground, where what we eat is developing beneath the ground. Now, what kind of a vegetable would that be?
Potatoes.
Carrots.
Beets.
Yeah, see, that's not hard, is it? When you know that when you're eating, if you want to raise turnips for the greens, then plant it in the light of the moon. If you want to raise turnips for the turnip, plant it in the dark of the moon. So for the 2 weeks that we are in the dark phase, we're planting things that produce beneath the ground. Now the challenge here at this particular time of the summer is many of the vegetables that produce beneath the ground are more cool weather vegetables. Almost everything that you named there. The turnips, typically they're planted in the fall. They could be planted in the spring. A lot of times they're used for a cover crop. Potatoes, onions, beets, radishes, all of these things are cool weather crops. By cool weather crops, we mean, of course, that they actually enjoy when the weather's cool, when the ground's cool, when the earth is warming up. And if you've planted these in your garden, you know that typically they bolt as soon as it starts getting hot. They just shoot up and go to seed, and you can pull a beet out that's been in it for a while, and it's going to be so tough you'd have to take a hatchet to cut it in two. So, right now there aren't too many things that we can plant that are below ground producers. But within a couple of weeks, or a month at the most, well, no, more like 3 or 4 weeks, we're going to start talking about the fall gardens. Because in Kentucky, we actually have, our growing window is about 165 days. Now that's hard to believe. Now that's right out of the extensionist book that they have back there on the wall. And if you don't have it, it's called Gardening in Kentucky. It's wonderful, and it would work anywhere. But we have this is the window in which we really call our growing seasons, about 135 to 165 days in Kentucky, depending on where you are in Kentucky. Obviously, if you're down Paducah, down along the southern border of Kentucky, it's a little bit warmer down there. There's a few more days. So we have a small time that we can get things in the ground and expect them to produce before frost in the fall. And the same thing is in the spring. That's why when I write so much about not getting in a hurry about your spring garden, because invariably, and you look at this spring has just been a disaster, in my opinion. It would not quit raining. And when it quit raining, it'd get cold. And then it would start raining again. We had a hard time breaking up our ground. There are a lot of things that are just really, really late. I just got stuff in the ground a couple of weeks ago in my own garden. I'm encouraged, if I can get my tiller running, that I'm going to be able to make a crop out of that. But if not, I mean, we'll try for the fall. It'll get running eventually. So we have this window that starts for hot weather planting, things that enjoy hot weather. It starts about the 1st, or about right around Mother's Day, between Derby Day and Mother's Day. And we know that this year, those occurred on the same weekend. The first weekend in May was Derby, of course, and the second Sunday is Mother's Day, and it happened that that's the way it broke out. So they were the same weekend. After that, you can pretty generally say, statistically speaking, you're past the danger of frost. So those are just gardening things. Phases of the moon. Things that produce below the ground, the dark of the moon. 2 weeks each month, 14 days. things that produce above the ground, tomatoes, beans, corn, squash, peppers, all of those things. When the moon is in the light phase, that is from the time of the new moon, as I told you a few minutes, the light moon from the time of the new moon to the full moon. The dark moon is from the time of the full moon until the next new moon, while the moon is waning. The waxing of the moon, the growing, and the waning. Now, how do you know this? You have to look at an almanac. You have to look on a calendar. You have to read my column in the Sunday paper. You have to look at something that has that chart figured out, because I do. You see what I passed out this. This is what I use all the time now to do my planning by the signs column in the paper. Now each month I change the month over here, obviously. We're about to change to July. Otherwise you're going to have a challenge. A couple of years ago, now I use this Farmer's Almanac. It's not called the Old Farmer's Almanac. It's just called Farmer's Almanac. You can't find it around here anymore. You have to order it. And they happen to know that I use this because I talk to them quite often. And it comes out of Lewiston, Maine. And to me, it's the easiest almanac that there is to read, because there are a lot of others that you can pick up at drugstores and at bookstores and so forth, but they're difficult to read. Now, up until about 2 or 3 years ago, if you look with me here, do you see where it says moon's place astronomically? The second column, or the third column, is the first one that's going vertically. Yes. This column right here. That's astronomically. Up until a couple of years ago, they had where the moon's phase was on this astrology chart in that place. It's different depending on what you're reading. There's a difference in that. So, back in the back of the almanac, we now have this page right here that takes the whole year, and it tells you what day it is, what month it is, and what the sign is. And that is so easy to read. That's a lot easier to read than this is over here. And I don't know why they changed that, but it's just so easy to look down there. Okay, for instance, we know that today is the 24th day of June. 6 months to Christmas Eve, as well. So I hope everybody's got their tree up. We look over here to the month of June, and we see what? Today is an Aries day, A-R-I. That is a killing sign. We don't want to plant when the sign is in Aries or the sign is in Leo. They're the two killing signs. That's today and tomorrow. Now, why does this? It seems this year that it occurs so often on the weekends that, yeah, it's just really tough. And next weekend we have the same situation, except it's Saturday and Sunday. And if you look on that, you see up here at the top of the page, the 2nd and 3rd of July, Friday is, or July. See, the 1st is Friday, that's Cancer, that's a very fertile sign. The next 2 days are both Leo days. That's Saturday and Sunday, a time when a lot of people used to do a lot of gardening. Before I get into the signs any further, does anyone have any questions? Am I going too fast? Am I making any sense? I do this so much that it's almost become second nature to me to think this way. Yes, ma'am.
Phil, would you go back again and tell me what waxing and waning, which way it's going?
Waxing is getting growing, the growing of the moon, and the waning is going back down. Wax is while it's growing larger. That's the light of the moon. The waning is when it's going down. That's the dark of the moon. Yes, ma'am.
What do you mean by the moon's place astronomical?
On this chart, yeah, well, it's just the difference between the astronomical. I'm not really sure what the difference is. All I know is the almanac just differentiates between those two.